everybody. Welcome back to the E3 podcast, where we encourage, educate, and empower female entrepreneurs. I'm excited today to have my good friend Beka Shea on.
Hey.
Say hi. So I've known Beka for how many years? Probably 4 or 5 years, something like that. It's been a few years. So you want to tell everybody just a little bit about yourself and kind of where you're at with your journey and your business?
That is a massive story. I'll condense it. Military officer, did ROTC in college, got my engineering degree, military officer for 4 years, engineer for 7 years. Pregnant with my third baby, decided I wanted to flip a house and not travel all the time like my corporate job was doing, and got into house flipping. Quickly scaled that over a couple of years from like 3 houses to 6 to 12, joined the 7-figure flipping mastermind, which shout out the Flipping Junkie podcast and your legacy are what made me think, oh, I can flip a house. Like just breaking down the numbers and seeing how you guys, ran your team. I was like, oh, this is, I don't know. There was just something about it that spoke to me in a way that I was like, that I can do this. So, joined the mastermind, really scaled a rehabbing and a wholesaling business. So over the past couple of years, I've rehabbed about 60 houses. I've wholesaled around 120 deals. And then last year, probably around spring, summer timeframe, I went through a big transition where I was like, all right, I've been doing this rehabbing and wholesaling for like 6 years. I was in a place where I was just really not happy. I had lost money on my wholesaling business side of the business. I was making money on the rehabs, but not enough. And I just took a step back and said, all right, I've kind of accumulated all these different skills. I know much more who I am and where I want to go. How do I use what I've learned to like pivot or, evolve into the next chapter, which at the time I thought was going to be a marketing consulting company. I was going to kind of combine my wholesaling experience and my engineering skills. Which I do on the side. So I was going to try and scale that. When the opportunity came along to run the small group accountability sessions and essentially the membership program at 7-figure flipping. So I took on that role in October. I tell everyone it's my dream job. When I said, what's my job description? Bill said, I want you to run the accountability groups and love on people. And I was like, yeah, okay. So that's where I am. I don't know, it's October, June now. I have to count on my fingers, but I think that's 8 months.
Seems right.
8 months into this role, and I feel like I'm finally getting my feet under me, but there's still just a bunch of challenges. I mean, it's been a huge transition. It was a big transition going from engineer to rehabber, and then from going to rehabber to like scaled real estate investing business. And then going from like setting aside that identity to move into this, which is it is an evolution. Like it fits nicely. It's a growth phase. But what I'm realizing is there's a lot of things internal to me that both drive me and hold me back. So I think that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Well, first of all, I'm curious to know for you, how did that feel, making that transition from, running your own business and everything to actually working for somebody else, like going back to I know it's not like exactly like a corporate kind of environment like that, but how was that for you? Was it difficult to wrap your mind around that?
I would say like 90% of me was like, everything in me said, yes, this is the place to be. I do have a fractional ownership of 7-figure flipping, which I think is key because I still get to have that feeling of like, the thing I hated about corporate America was that my income was always capped. No matter what I did for the company, no matter how great I was, if I made the company $1 bajillion, I still wasn't going to make more. I would get like a $10,000 bonus, right? Like,
yeah,
yay. So I like that I still have that option and all the options I was considering, because what happened was as soon as I kind of made the decision that I was going to move into a new thing, a bunch of opportunities came my way. And so I really had the luxury of saying like, what's the best fit? Um, and having part ownership was necessary, but the reason we get into entrepreneurship or we start our own businesses, I think, is this dream, this idea of freedom, whether that's financial freedom or time freedom, kind of whatever that looks like. And when you go back to take a job in a company, like vacation, like, okay, listen, even when I ran my own business, I was pretty much a workaholic, but if I wanted to take a week or two off or just cut out for the day, like, I was a boss, no one's going to tell me no. And it's not like things are really inflexible in 7-figure flipping, but just the thought that I am an employee, I always feel like guilt. Like, I want to take a day off. So now I have to ask permission from somebody. And like, that's been the hardest thing to wrap my head around.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Cause I feel like for me, so, okay, just to share real quick, I kind of went through the same thing. It's kind of funny that you said that. And it was about the same time actually too. So, been running the flipping business for a really long time, and then met this guy that had a software business, and we got to talking, and he does real estate too. And so, he was like, I'd really like to work with you, and I'm kind of like, oh, well, maybe, I don't know, like, I'm doing my own thing, whatever. And then, shit kind of hit the fan personally, and I was worried about my security, just like, I don't know, for some reason I had the thought, like, I don't know if I can still do this on my own. And, maybe I do need to work with somebody else. And so he hired me and I was going to be a COO. And so, and really help him, put all the experience that I had with the software company and with house flipping and education and stuff like that, and really like help him grow his business. And I quickly realized that I couldn't do it. It's really hard, right? And I had no ownership in it either. At least you have that. I didn't have that. I mean, I was compensated, but it was that whole mental shift, that weird, feeling of, okay, now, I need to just focus on this. And I still had the house flipping. So I was kind of torn between both. Like, what do I work on? And then just the asking for permission to have a day off or something, it was just, and then I realized I can't do this. I don't like people telling me what to do.
I phrased it in terms of asking for a day off, but I think it's actually, you're right, the underlying issue is asking for permission, right? For a long time, we didn't have to ask anybody for permission. And I'm not sure that this could have worked with anyone other than Bill. Like, we have a very strong relationship built on like mutual respect and like understanding of each other. So I feel bad for him because a lot of times I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. And then he's like, it's hard sometimes to separate that relationship from the employee-employer. But even when I started, he was like, we work together. You don't work for me, which I thought was nice. I do work for him. But that's okay, because I have bought into the vision 100%. And I think that's like a couple of the job offers I had were COO. And like, I don't think if I didn't buy 100% into the vision, like sometimes I think I cast the vision more strongly for 7-figure flipping than Bill does. Cause I know I want to be the Brian Buffini of real estate investors. Like, that's it. No one is going to sway me from that track. That is where I want to be. So.
Of that. And I think that, with Bill saying that too, I think that's really like a testament to a great leader too, that he wants you to feel like you're part of it, that you're not under him, that y'all are all.
Yeah. And I don't mind the thing that I do like, that I didn't like being an entrepreneur. And I think I said this in the email, is when you're the sole owner, you're expected to have all the answers. You're expected to know everything, whether or not it's realistic that you should be expected to know that and be good at that. And I was tired after 4, 5, 6 years, however many, like I was tired of having to know all the answers. I'm very happy right now being able to be an expert in like a field, right? So
I totally feel that. And it is that, it's funny that you reach that burnout point, something that you're so passionate about, and you should go back to your why, why did I start doing this? And, always is freedom, and we talk about that all the time, but I don't think we talk enough about like what that actually means.
Yeah.
Like for real, like freedom. I don't even know that it's financial freedom. A lot of times it's more of the freedom of time and the freedom to do what you want without asking permission.
Yeah. Permission freedom.
Yeah. Permission to be free, sir.
Yeah.
Because it's like you get the freedom and you think it's what you want, but sometimes that doesn't always end up being the case.
Yeah. And it's funny because, you hear a lot of these stories about people who get the financial freedom, right? They're making $1 million a year or whatever, but they're slaves to their job or their corporation. And like, that's not what they want either. So I agree. I think it's easy for people to say they want financial freedom, but if they dig deeper, they'll realize that's not it.
Yeah. I always feel like there's definitely there's an underlying thing always under that.
Mm-hmm.
It's the financial freedom, but what does that allow you to do? Like, what are you going to do with that once you have it? You're not just going to stop,
right. Yeah. And most of us have kind of this workaholic tendency. If you've ever considered being an entrepreneur, it's probably because you have a little bit of this ability to just work, right? To get so enthralled in something. And so I always find it comical when people are like, I just need to make, $300K a year or passive income or whatever, net, my business. And then I'm done. I'm like, then what are you going to do? Like, you're going to go build something else because you're doing this for the joy of building the thing.
Yeah. And that's a great point too. I love that you said that because that's kind of something I've recently discovered about myself. And it's funny, like, I feel like I'm older, but I'm learning all these lessons now. And I love when, somebody figures it out a lot sooner because I'm like, damn, that's awesome. Like, I wish I would have figured that out a lot sooner, instead of.
Well, I think we all I may have figured this out at this age and you might have figured out at this age, but I'm sure there were things you learned down here that I'm still like completely in the dark about.
Well, that's a great thing about being able to connect with so many people and we can talk about these things and see, okay, well, where are you at?
Yeah.
Like learn from each other's experiences because, sometimes there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. It's already been done. Just make it better.
Exactly.
So let's talk about your struggles. Tell me about your struggle bus.
All right. Well, sometimes I'm sure you feel this way too with self-awareness and self-reflection. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to look deep inside myself and grow and become better. And then other days I wake up and I'm like, this is who I am. Take it or leave it. Not changing.
All the time.
So I feel like it's been a little bit of a season of self-reflection and growth. And I'm probably coming into a season where I'm going to be like, I am who I am. Like, just pause that. So the things where I'm at right now are twofold. I mentioned Bill. So he's the owner of Seven Figure Flipping, and my boss who I work with. He's great. He's a huge visionary, but he is a relentless worker too. Like he can sheer like force of will things into existence, which I love, but it's also like can be crushing. The pressure, and he doesn't mean for it to be. It's great. We had a great conversation about it last week. Like, he doesn't mean for it to be crushing. This is like his internal drive, and sometimes it leaks onto the people around him. And like the more you're around him, the more it leaks, right? Combine that with, I also have those tendencies inside myself to like push. And I'm a relationship person, so like if I see you, like prime example is a race, right? If we're at a race and I've finished the race and I see you haven't finished and you're still coming in, I'm going to go back and I'm going to run with you to support you, even if I'm completely dead. That's just who I am. So if I see him working really hard to make something happen, even if I'm at the limits of where I should be, like my capacity, I'm still going to push harder. Mm-hmm. So it's dual. It's like, number one, how do you protect yourself from outside influences, especially when those outside influences are not necessarily bad? Like, it's one thing to say if you're in an abusive relationship and be like, I need to protect myself from this. But like when it's someone who you love and, you know, you feel like you just need to live up to those expectations. And then also internally, I want to do more. And I did a Facebook Live. I'm doing this 30-day challenge to lead. And my thought yesterday was like, I don't know, we put so much pressure on ourselves. Like, I am super important, but also I'm not that important. Like, I'm not Gandhi. I'm not going to, you know, when I die, there will be a handful of people that will remember me, right? I mean, max probably like 1,000. Okay, maybe more than that, but like, not, my name's not going to go in a history book somewhere. So like, I'm not that important, but I'm super important to the people around me. Mm-hmm. And there's that constant struggle of like the ego side of like wanting to be that important to make my mark versus what I've already committed to and like not neglecting that. Does that make sense? I haven't found a way to articulate that yet. Well,
no, I get it. And it is hard, I think, when you put like visionaries together. Mm-hmm. And what I have learned about working with other visionaries is even though we're all visionary, we all have different abilities. We're all like stronger in certain areas and weaker in other areas. So even though like overall we have the same characteristics, some present themselves differently. Yeah. You know, like patience, you know, is one. You know, and good example, like in our mastermind with Dawn, like me, Dawn, and Mike all have the same personality profile, believe it or not.
What is it?
We're all, what is it? It's Mavericks on the PI.
All right. The predictive index for your listeners, like is a personality profiling.
Yes.
Which both Melissa and I speak that language.
Yeah, I should clarify. Yes. So yeah, personality index. So yeah, we're all Mavericks, but even though we all have that same, you know, we all fit in that kind of box or whatever, the degree of some of the characteristics vary with us. Like Mike doesn't have a lot of patience. Dawn and I have a ton of patience, you know, and
none of you have attention to detail.
Right.
Big vision, like people, less patience, no detail.
Right. So that's a recipe for an interesting situation. But, you know, but the cool thing is that we all recognize that. And now that we understand it, mm-hmm. we communicate a lot. It's easier to communicate now because we know, okay, well, I'm going to be a little flighty. That's just, that's how I am. You know, I'll be like so into something for a little bit, but then I get distracted and then I'm on to something else. Mm-hmm. You know, I may or may not circle back to that thing. You know, it just kind of depends, you know. So we've all kind of had to pick up the slack with the detail stuff and then surround ourselves with people who are good at those things. Cause I think that's another like key thing. And what is your personality profile? I'm curious. Do you know?
I think it's called the captain in predictive index. In culture index, it's trailblazer. So I have the detail. Same profile. I have big vision. I like people. The impatience is actually my driving trait. Like that's my most dominant trait by a long shot. And then I have the detail hook. So that's a whole life goal. Also, the impatience I think is part of this feeling, this crushing pressure to like do more and fit more in, because it's like in my head, I see the thing done already. And then I am frustrated when I can't accomplish it in like 2 hours. And I think that that's a life journey I've gotten better at, of understanding that, sure, if I devoted 100% of my time to this one thing for 5 days, it would be done, but I don't have 100% of my time. I'm probably going to have to hire people who are less driven than me. So it's going to take, where it might take me a week, it might take them 3 weeks. It's just been a big journey.
It always is. It's always a journey. But I mean, that's part of the fun, I think, of this, like, just figuring all this stuff out. So like,
so I guess that's the first thing to dig into. Like, how do we protect ourselves from ourselves or people like us who we are like drawn to them?
Yeah. So I think one is just like knowing who you are, right? And even knowing a little bit about like the people that you're working with, like their personality profiles and things like that. And just knowing, you know, like Bill's going to be a driver probably, like he's going to be, pushing and always wanting to go to the next thing and then next big idea, thing like that. And just knowing what your limits are, it's like we talked about with the Moms of Real Estate podcast, the boundaries.
Yeah.
What are your boundaries for work? How much are you willing to do before you say, okay, like I got to cut it off now. And I think the other thing too is like this whole concept of like this grind, like we have to be grinding all the time and like working so hard. And I was a victim to that too for a while, and you probably are too, but because we feel like we have to do all the things, we have to do all of them well.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be a good mom, we have to be a good business owner, we have to be a good leader, like all these things. And something I learned recently that could be helpful is just knowing that it's okay to stop sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
My dad, he's been on me for years. He's like, you need to slow down. You do too much. You're always doing something. Why can't you just be still? And I was trying to explain to him, that's not who I am. Like, I'm sure you understand that. Like, we struggle because we are entrepreneurs and we're driven and we want to accomplish all these things. But, and I would get frustrated when he would tell me that, like, no, I don't want to stop. Like, I just need to keep going. And then I turned a corner, like after 40, and realized that, you know what, that work is always going to be there.
Yeah.
But my kids are not always going to be home. They're not always going to want me loving on them or, hanging out with them or whatever. That's not forever. They're going to grow up and go away. And I don't want to waste that time. I don't want to look back and say, my God, like I was, on my phone half the time. And it's hard. Don't get me wrong. Like it's hard to cut that off. But when I started realizing that work is always going to be there. So you need to stop. It's okay to stop. The world is not going to fall apart. Things aren't going to blow up,
You're not that important.
Yeah. It's who is it? I think it's Elizabeth Gilbert in Big Magic, that book that she wrote. It's really good. But she talks about that, and she says, you think everybody's watching you, you think everybody cares, but reality is people really only care about themselves, and nobody's really watching you,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't, not that they don't care, but it's just a blip on the radar of their life. Something happens to you. Whereas if something happens to them, it's like, all about them.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. One of the people on our team yesterday, we had our L10 and it was Father's Day Sunday. And she came in, and you start off, and we follow Traction EOS, and you start off by sharing good news, personal and professional good news. And when it came to their turn, they were like, so my dad has a blood clot in his brain and he went into the hospital last night, and he has short-term memory loss. He doesn't know who he is, who we are, or where he is. And I'm like, we're about to launch into this meeting, and I just thought in my brain, there's no way they can be mentally present. Like in their world is just stopped, right? Mm-hmm. And for the rest of us, it just goes on.
Yeah.
The day continues. And I think about that, this is kind of like a sidebar, but how one of the interesting things, I think death is probably the easiest way to understand this, is like your world can stop, everyone else continues, right? Like people don't even realize it. And I think that's like the biggest illustration of you're just not that important. People just don't think about you that much, for better or worse.
Right. And I think knowing that could help protect you against that kind of thing. So we're like, and remembering too, like that's a choice that you're making. Like Bill's choosing to work that hard, and he's got his own agenda, for his life and whatever. So he's making that choice, just like it's up to you to make the choice of, how much you want to do and where your boundaries are, and just like having that clarity, I think, around that, and then, I don't know. I'm telling you, there's just something very freeing about just being able to
Say no.
put, yeah, to say
Not just
no.
no boundaries, but also to stick to your boundaries. And I think what you just said actually is kind of interesting, right? Also that we have seasons of our life. So, and just because someone else is in a different season, if he's in a season where he can work, all the time and really push and do it, that's not to say that in 2 years, he might be like, I'm going to a beach for a year. Like I can't compare where I'm at in my journey to where they are.
Right. Because we've all got a different destination,
Yeah. Yeah.
so just, putting some light on that could
So
be
then
helpful.
the other struggle, like going back to the internal thing, right? Put the boxes on that. And I think setting the boundaries. I also think just, we talked about having this podcast and I said, here's what I'm struggling with. And I said, I'm going to have this conversation before we talk about this publicly. I want to talk about this privately. Right. So Bill and I had a really great conversation last week. And I think that's probably been one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the past year or two is that like, if you like, the truth will set you free, right? Mm-hmm. Like speaking these things out loud and having a conversation from a place of love. If you're in a spot where you feel like someone else is kind of, putting pressure on you or whatever, being able to, instead of just taking it and letting the resentment build up or the stress or the anxiety, like be able to have that conversation. That's been huge because I find that the second that the words leave my mouth, it instantly takes the power away.
Oh yeah. I mean, communication is key, like in everything. And that actually, when you said that, that reminds me, I read this thing the other day and it's exactly that. It's you, I'm going to totally mess this up, but it's something about risk being uncomfortable for the short term versus, major dysfunction down the road. So yeah, it might be uncomfortable to have that conversation right now with him to let him know like how you're feeling, the kind of the stress, and like how much should I be working and trying to keep up and all that. But when you can have that conversation now versus like you said, like letting it sit there and kind of fester and build, and then you get angry and it builds up, and then,
you write these stories in your head that maybe aren't even true, right? Based on these things. And, I think my friend Terry Berger was saying that he's like, and then I write these stories in my head that aren't true. And I was like, yes,
we do. Cause we get in our heads so much, like you start making assumptions, which is very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
I've lived through that. And when people start assuming things, that's when you start having a lot of problems, and then you don't want to communicate. And I feel like it just like snowballs into this bad situation. Whereas if you can identify it and have the conversation up front and be uncomfortable for a few minutes enough to get it out, and then like you said, like you feel better because it's out there, and then you can talk about it. And then if they get mad, that's on them. It's they're choosing to react that way, but at least you spoke your truth, you said what you needed to say, you got it out, and you can kind of move on from that.
Yeah. So then, I worked through that a little bit and still working through it. But one of the side things that came out in that conversation was this idea of, like I mentioned before, we have these cell phones that are essentially computers in our hand and we are on all time. And one of the things that I thought that Bill said was super interesting was, do you feel like you're working all the time versus or being available to work all the time? And so I almost think of it like the computer is like a low level, or the phone is like a low level hum in the background, right? Like, and when you're working hard, that hum goes up, it's a symphony or whatever, like it's, the music is loud, but it never turns off now. As long as I have this phone in my hand, there's always some noise, like potential. It's like that hum. And so I'm never completely mentally off. And so there's that personally, where you just like feel, oh, I'll just check it. Just, oh, what's my email? And I do it compulsively. Like I check my email and stuff. And then that has the ability to like derail the whole night if something bad comes through. And my husband too, he runs his own business. And so it's the same thing. Like there have been nights where it's like, he's in a great mood. It's Friday afternoon. He's just about to kick off work for the weekend. And like, we're going to go do something fun. And then one stupid Slack message comes through and he's pissed off for the next 3 hours. Right. So that like constant availability to work is my current struggle. And I think everyone says, just turn your phone off for some time and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I've tried.
That's hard. That is so hard to do because we're so used to it now, Yeah. That's a funny thing too, though. Like we really weren't up into a certain point.
Yeah.
We were way less connected, just even, I don't know, a few years ago, probably. Maybe not a few years.
And it impacts your conversational skills. Like Father's Day, right? We're at my sister's house, my nieces and nephews. Of course, my nieces grew up like their faces glued to their phone. Mm-hmm. So they're just sitting there and they're interacting, but they're like always distracted, right? They always have that low level hum in the background. And my dad's there. And I kind of I willingly checked out of engaging in the conversation to be into my phone. And I was almost kind of like, I don't really want to like make the effort of conversation, but if I had, we probably would have had some great conversations once I forced them to stop talking about coronavirus and politics.
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you have you found ways I guess that's what I'm curious from everyone is like, what have you done successfully to detach?
Yeah. Well, there's a few things and I struggle with this. I have ADHD, which I wasn't diagnosed until a couple of years ago. So I was diagnosed as an adult. So when I was, it's like, oh, everything makes so much more sense now. That's why I focus on anything. And so what I was finding was the same thing. Like I'd be working and if my phone would light up or ding or something, I could see it out of the corner of my eye and it would break my pattern of thinking. And so I was in this constant focus, break the focus, focus again, break the focus, focus again, break the focus. And it's like, I couldn't get anything done.
Yeah.
So I started, I turned off all the notifications. So the stuff is still on there, but it doesn't ding and beep and vibrate or do anything now.
I need to do
that. I did that. Yeah. And also, I turned my phone upside down too.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing. If it was up, if something would pop up, I'd see it. But if I turned it face down, excuse me. I think one of the problems that we have with this, and I attribute this to being a mom, is I'm always scared my kids are going to try to get a hold of me. Mm-hmm. And so if it does ding, especially during school, if the nurse calls or something, I'm always on the lookout for that. I have to have that in the back of my mind, knowing okay, they're not with me and if they need to reach me, I need to be available for my kids, but not everything else. So how do you, not.
Yeah, but you know what, the other interesting thing is, like you said, these phones are relatively new to us. I grew up, I didn't have a cell phone. I couldn't reach my parents. And I definitely got left at track practice a few times and I'm still bitter about it. But
one time they never let you forget.
But I think of that all the time, how much we're kind of enabling our kids not to problem solve by always being available to them. And but then there's the paranoia, right? Of just, what if something bad happened? What if they get a flat tire and they're on the side of the road? And okay, well, what if they did get a flat tire and they're on the side of the road and they couldn't get through to me? Do they know what to do?
Yeah. Do I know what to do? Call somebody.
Yeah, call somebody, right?
Yeah. What I did was I turned off all the notifications for all the extra crap. So, my Gmail, my Facebook, my Instagram, all those things, no notifications pop up on my phone. Text still do, but if I do get a text, I look and see. And if it's my kids, I check it. If it's not important, I don't respond to them right away. And I always tell them, the older ones, if you call me and I don't answer, it's because I'm working. And so if it's important, hang up and call me right back so that I know it's important, but otherwise I'll call you back whenever I'm finished.
Yeah.
And I've kind of had to train people that are close to me in my life to let them know, like, I'm not ignoring your call. It's just I'm in the zone. And if I break that zone, it's going to be a problem for me later. And so if I don't answer, I'll call you back or I'll text you back or whatever. But
Yeah, I
that
think that goes to like even time blocking too. I do well, but for me, it's more, I have found lately, especially in the terms of having kids, I'm very cognizant when I get done work that I'm constantly like checking my phone and not being engaged with them. And I think what I'm struggling with right now is that I'm setting this example for my kids. Like I'm teaching them that it's okay for someone to be talking to them and them to be have their face down, like when you should be making eye contact, looking them in the eye, paying attention, asking follow-up questions. Like, I don't think I'm setting that example for them. And I think I'm tired and I'm lazy at the end of the day. And I'm like, just don't want to.
well,
Like,
because
what's
it's
parenting?
yeah. I mean, and I'm not saying I win at this every day either. You know, there are days like yesterday where my son was literally on the screen all day long, you know, and then we go to bed and he's like still, you know, watching a video or something. I'm like, put that thing down. You're gonna go blind. It's been all day, you know, but because I was busy all day long. And so that was definitely a fail. But
Well, I like that. I am going to try the turning off the notifications. I did, like last week, I set the screen time limits so that I think at 8 p.m. till 6 a.m. it turns off. I have the option to ignore it, but at least I'm getting that reminder like, hey, it's after 8 p.m. Do you really need to go on Facebook right now? Or are you just mindlessly scrolling, right?
right. Well, because we're bored, we don't know what else to do with ourselves. But you
Yeah.
know, one thing that I had jotted down when we were chatting was something that I think we don't do enough or think about enough is this idea of rest.
Yeah.
And so I read this book, The Stillness is the Key. I don't know if you've read that or not, but it is awesome. Like,
Right.
it's one of those books when people say, what's a book that changed your life? That's totally one of those books for me. And the reason I say that is because after I read that book, it really opened my eyes to that's when I had that epiphany of like, the work's always going to be there,
Mm-hmm.
but taking the time to be still and to be present, that is a skill that I want to work on myself. And it is a skill that you do have to work on. That's not something that comes easy, I don't think, especially with all the distractions that we have. So
Yeah.
taking that time to really just, because like he talks about it, when you're resting and you're still, and this doesn't mean like taking a nap. It just means like sitting and not doing anything, you know,
Yeah.
not distracting yourself with Facebook or something like that. Like doing something that you wouldn't normally do, something to let your mind go. So like I'm a creative person, for example, like I love making art. So I find that if I'm kind of stressed or whatever, like that's a rest for me, is to sit and to make some art.
Yeah.
My mind is resting and I'm just being creative. And he talks about like that's where your creativity really blossoms, is in those periods of stillness and rest when your mind can just roam, you know. And there's always going to be like distractions and clutter and stuff in your brain, but as you hone that skill of being still and just kind of let your mind go where it will, and eventually it's going to get tired of all the problem stuff, and then you have this like clarity moments. And by doing something that's not in your normal thing, like he tells a story about, I think, Winston Churchill. Like he was very stressed out about all the stuff. This is like right before World War II. And he actually took up bricklaying. And so he would
Totally
go.
see that. Like just giving your hands something to do and letting your mind.
Yeah.
I have to get going to to another call,
Oh yeah.
but
Yeah.
um,
So
I'm going to read that book. But I think there's a lot to that. And one of the books that kind of changed my life was his book Tribe of Mentors, and the number of achieving people who said like meditation and just learning to be that way. So have me back on in a couple months and I'll tell you how I'm progressing on my stillness.
try it. See how it works for you. I feel like it helped me, but reading that book was really like, when he explains everything, it caused a shift in my mind that nothing else had been able to do. So hopefully that will help.
I'm going to read it. Yeah. I will let you know when I do
that. Well, thanks for being on. Do you real quick want to tell people where they can find you?
I'm on TikTok because I love TikTok. So my name's Beka Shea, BEKASHEA, and I'm on Instagram like at Beka Shea. I think there might be an underscore between them. I'm on Facebook. I kind of live on Facebook. I don't do much on Instagram, and TikTok's just for fun for me. So.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking, and we'll definitely do this again.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Melissa.
All right. Have a good day.